The story starts inside a grand mansion, where a blind boy named Kunan sits quietly, surrounded by family members wearing gentle, pitiful smiles. He's always been told his eyes would never work, so he often finds himself wondering what it truly means to see, and his father told him it's the ability to recognize colors and shapes. And it turns out that the reason Kunan was blind was that his eyes carried the mark known as the hero's scar, a mysterious imprint once left by the legendary knight Julia. His father told him it wasn't something ordinary, and Kunan should hold his head high for bearing it, not hang it low in shame. But even then, the maids would still whisper when they thought he couldn't hear, saying how heartbreaking it was, how sorry they felt for him. Kunan did hear them, and he couldn't understand why people would feel sorry for someone just because they couldn't see. Later that same day, his magic instructor showed up and a maid carefully led Kunan to the study. On the way there, he asked her if there was even any point in learning magic in the first place, so Iko gently told him it'd be a shame to waste such potential. After all, he was born with a water crest, and that was no small thing. It meant he could wield magic, a rare and valuable gift, so it's something to be proud of. But Kunan still didn't see the use, and even if he masters magic, he'll still need someone to lead him around everywhere he goes. When they reached the study, the teacher introduced herself as Genie and said it'd be an honor to teach him. Not long after, they began the lesson, and to everyone's surprise, Kunan nailed the first spell right off the bat. With just one attempt, he conjured a small sphere of water. Of course, since he couldn't see it, he didn't know what it looked like. Genie explained that he had made a floating ball of water, roughly the size of an eyeball. Hearing that suddenly sparked something in Kunan. If he mastered magic well enough, maybe he could create new eyes with his power so he could see. And that tiny idea lit a fire in him, so from that moment on, Kunan held on to one belief. If he trained hard enough, one day, magic might let him witness colors and shapes the same as everybody else. Then one afternoon, while eating lunch, something unusual happened. Kunan got curious about what was actually inside his sandwich, and for the first time, he asked about the ingredients. So Echo happily walked him through each one, describing every detail. And preparing meals for him suddenly felt more meaningful now that he was finally curious about what he was eating. After finishing lunch, Kunan's tutor Flora drops by to read with him and asks what story he's in the mood for today. Without hesitation, Kunan says he wants to hear about the legendary knight Julia. Flora pauses, clearly caught off guard because she knows full well that Hister is the very hero tied to Kunan's blindness. The maid catches her hesitation and flashes her a confident thumbs up, signaling it'll be alright. Flora nods, agreeing to go ahead, but gently asks Kunan to tell her if the story becomes too upsetting. But he assures her it won't be an issue, saying he wants to absorb every piece of knowledge he can, no matter how heavy. As Flora begins recounting the tale, Kunan learns that ages ago, the world's champions clashed in a brutal war against the Demon King. Hister, hailed as the nation's greatest warrior, managed to strike down the Demon Lord. Though it cost him dearly, he emerged victorious, but with one arm and one leg lost in the fight. Ever since that battle, it's said that some of his descendants are born incomplete, missing limbs, eyes, or other parts of their bodies. So these children are often labeled as the hero reborn or bearers of the hero's scar. But even as he listens, Kunan quietly brushes it off as nonsense. Deep down, he knows this has nothing to do with him. His life isn't some echo of a heroic tale, it's his own, and what truly matters isn't a myth or a legacy, it's what he can accomplish through magic. He doesn't care about some legendary scar. What he cares about is unlocking the full potential of his power, and he's already made up his mind. He'll figure out a way to craft new eyes using magic, no matter what it takes. But the sheer amount of magical training he throws himself into eventually pushes his young body past its limits, and he ends up collapsing from total exhaustion. Iko rushes to his side and hurries him back inside to rest. Once he's had time to recover, Kunan, more determined than ever, realizes he has to step up both mentally and physically. And passing out from magic overuse just won't cut it for someone chasing a dream this big, so if he wants to wield magic for long stretches without faltering, he needs to toughen up his body as well. Iko suggests he start learning swordsmanship to build endurance and muscle, and also eat more to support his growth. Still, she warns him that everything needs to progress gradually, piling it all on too fast could do more harm than good. With his mind made up, Kunan dives into his new regimen under the guidance of Master Aro. The training is grueling and leaves him drained, but little by little, Kunan keeps up. The progress is slow, but it's steady, and that's what matters. When it's time for his magic lesson, Jenny arrives at the training field and Master Oro quietly steps aside to give them space. Jenny approaches and remarks how impressed she is to see him picking up swordplay on top of everything else. Kunan nods, confirming that he's been working at it, explaining that if he's serious about his goal, he's going to need a ridiculous amount of stamina to back it up. Genie had always seen Kunan as the quiet, brooding type, but today he feels entirely different. There's no trace of that empty look in his eyes. Now there's purpose burning behind them. They get started on their magic session, and Genie asks him to perform the same spell they practiced last time. Back then, Kunan had barely managed to conjure a single water orb, but now, without hesitation, he summons 7 of them at once. Jenny's stunned because she hasn't taught him any new techniques, yet he's managed to leap forward entirely on his own. That same afternoon, Princess Mirika, Kunon's fiancée, is set to visit. The idea of the meeting leaves her uneasy. Kunon's always been too withdrawn for her taste, and while she understands that this marriage is a matter of royal duty, the thought of being tied to someone so emotionally distant leaves her cold. But the moment she steps into the mansion, she notices something's changed. Kunon carries himself differently. He has a spark now, and their conversation flows in a way it never has before. He even shows off his progress in water magic, and to her surprise, she finds it genuinely fascinating. They spend the entire day together, and it turns out to be a surprisingly lovely time. On the carriage ride home, Mirika can't stop herself from blushing, her mind drifting back to the way he spoke, the way he smiled. And for the first time, she actually looks forward to seeing him again. As for Kunon, the encounter leaves him quietly reflecting. He realizes he's been overlooking Mirika all this time, taking her presence for granted. So with fresh resolve, he goes straight to Flora and asks her to teach him how to carry himself like a true gentleman, one worthy of Mirika's hand. That night, Jenny finds herself replaying Kunon's training session in her head. No matter how she looks at it, the fact that he effortlessly casts 7 water spheres at once is hard to ignore, especially since even she hasn't pulled that off before. It's becoming painfully obvious that Kunon has already mastered the fundamentals of water magic, which leaves her with almost nothing new to teach. Still, she needs to keep earning her paycheck, so she decides it's time to shift her teaching strategy. The following day, during their lesson, she introduces a new concept, breaking water magic down into separate stages, generating the water, suspending it in midair, and holding its form. To demonstrate, she conjures 2 orbs of water, one steaming hot and the other ice cold, then explains that real mastery comes from controlling the nature of the magic itself. That's what sets seasoned mages apart from novices. Kunon takes her words seriously and decides to test the method right away. He uses his magic to fill a cup with water, then hands it to Iko and asks her to give it a taste. She takes a sip, pauses, and then remarks that the water oddly tastes like apples. Jeannie keeps a straight face, but deep down she's fuming. Yet again, Kunon picked up something new almost instantly, before she even had the chance to break it down properly. That evening, Kunon doesn't sleep a wink. He stays up, training nonstop, determined to fully grasp the technique Jenny showed him. He focuses hard on visualizing apples, their shape, their fragrance, every little detail. He gets most of it right, but no matter how hard he tries, he just can't seem to picture their colors. This becomes a serious hurdle. If he can't imagine colors, then creating his own eyes through magic will remain out of reach. But Kunon doesn't back down and swears to keep trying, no matter how long it takes. By the next morning at breakfast, Kunon gives it another shot. He conjures a water orb and gently moves it above the apples sitting on the table. Suddenly, his body jerks upright and his eyes widen in disbelief. Iko rushes to him, concerned, and asks what's wrong. But Kunon's expression shifts to excitement as he blurts out that he can see colors. At first, Iko assumes he's just imagining things until he points to the fruit bowl and accurately calls out 2 green apples and 3 red ones. She checks, and when she realizes he's spot on, her eyes fill with tears of joy. Without a second thought, she throws her arms around him and squeezes tight, overjoyed at his breakthrough. Iko then rushes to deliver the incredible news to Kunon's father, explaining with excitement that Kunon can now use magic to see colors. She adds that the closer an object is and the more clearly defined its shape, the easier it is for him to identify its color simply by touching it. Even more astonishing, she mentions that this ability now lets Kunon read books by tracing the ink on each page and recognizing the color of the letters. Though he hasn't quite learned how to read words just yet, she's confident that it won't be long before he figures that out too. Kunon's father is overjoyed by the update and swells with pride, feeling like his son is finally making real, undeniable progress. The next morning, Kunon decides to surprise Jeannie before she arrives by showing off a massive red water orb he created using his magic. He's fully focused, carefully forming the spell until out of nowhere, his entire family suddenly appears and the shock completely throws him off. He loses control and the red water explodes in every direction, soaking both himself and Iko from head to toe. The scene leaves him looking like he's been doused in blood, which makes his mother scream in horror and faint. Kunon is left blinking in confusion, wondering what just happened, until Iko calmly explains that blood is red and seeing her son covered in it probably freaked his mom out a little too much. Kunon's father doesn't waste a second and sternly scolds his son for causing such a scare and declares that his allowance will be cut off for 2 whole months. Then he turns to Iko and announces that her pay will be slashed for 3 months straight. The moment those words hit her ears, Iko, who lives and breathes for her paycheck, passes out instantly. At the same time, hidden just out of sight behind a nearby bush, Jenny silently watches the entire scene play out. As she takes it all in, one thought crosses her mind. Kunon is far more gifted than she originally imagined, and at the pace he's growing, she can't help but believe he might one day earn the world's highest magical title, the legendary Cerulean Sorcerer. A few days later, Kunon's father brings up the idea of sending him to school. Hearing that, his older brother Ixio is caught off guard and points out that Kunon's never even set foot outside the estate. Gurion agrees but says that's exactly why he wants him to go, to help his little brother learn how to adapt to the real world. The moment hits Ixio with a flashback from when they were younger, back when he tried to guide Kunan outside to play. Kunan had been nervous, so Ixio offered to hold his hand the whole time. But just as he turned to lead him out, he tripped over the stairs and face-planted. Snapping back to the present, Ixio hides his nerves and assures their father he'll do everything he can to support Kunan. The following morning, Iko watches with amusement as Kunan plays around with a bowl of water. He explains that he enchanted the dish with magic and turned it into a fortune-teller's tool for fun. Iko jumps at the idea and asks him to use it to check if her long-lost youth is still alive. He grins and tells her she's still in her prime. Not done yet, she teases him by asking if he can tell her who her future husband will be. Kunan smirks and says that someone as gorgeous as her will never have a shortage of admirers. Flora watches the two bicker and banter and starts second-guessing whether it was smart to teach Kunan how to joke like that in the first place. Later, Flora starts a lesson with him, all while Kunan keeps cracking jokes like a pro. She wonders if he's headed down the path of becoming a shameless flirt, but deep down, she's just happy to see how much he's changed. His smile is brighter now, and his mood lighter. After the lesson wraps up, Iko takes him outside to meet his father. Feeling chilly, she asks him to conjure up some warm water balls. Kunan does so, but feels uneasy because he can't help but wonder why his dad would want to see him this late. Akko tells him not to worry since he hasn't done anything wrong, unless you count that blood explosion incident a while back. Kunan fires back that she's the one who talked him into it in the first place, but he admits it was kind of fun. Before long, they reach the main estate where the head butler, Balin, greets them. Not long after, Kunan's older brother shows up and leads the two toward their father's room. As they walk, his brother asks if Kunan needs a hand getting around. Kunan quickly shakes his head, reminding him he can sense his surroundings just fine now. His brother nods, though the memory of messing up last time still lingers in his mind. Shortly, they step into a room where both of Kunan's parents are already waiting. Once Kunan and his brother go inside, Iko and Balin stay outside the door. Then Gurion turns to Kunan and asks if he's open to the idea of attending a proper school. Kunan shuts it down immediately, saying he doesn't want to be a burden on others who'd have to look after him all the time. He adds that he's got something important he's working on at home and wonders if it's really that big of a deal not to go. Gurion explains that while it's normally mandatory for noble kids to attend school, he managed to get a special exemption from the Emperor so Kunan could stay home due to his condition. Kunan's not thrilled, he suspects favoritism and says as much, but Gurion waves it off and tells him to stay focused. He tries once more to get Kunan to change his mind about staying home, but Kunan dodges the subject and instead asks if he can get his allowance back. That sets Gurion off and the two of them dive straight into a heated back and forth. Thankfully, his wife steps in and reminds him why they're even having this talk. Regaining his composure, Gurion gets back on track and explains that this is about Mirika. He points out that any noble who skips their duties ends up shunned, and if she marries someone seen as uneducated, the backlash would fall on her too. That hits Kunan harder than expected, and after thinking it over, he finally agrees to give school a shot. Still annoyed by the whole situation, Kunan is at least a little comforted when Gurion clarifies that he doesn't have to attend full-time, just show up for the yearly advancement exams. As long as he shows up 5 times for tests, he'll qualify for graduation, and that bit of news actually lifts Kunan's spirits. Ixio jumps in to remind Kunan that both he and Mirika are upperclassmen, so they'll help him settle in. His mom perks up, excited at the thought of getting her son's uniform ready. She calls Iko, and the two of them head out to get Kunan's measurements with Ixio trailing after them. Gurion stops him just before he can leave, warning that some nobles might give Kunan and Mirika a hard time at school. Ixio takes the hint and assures him he'll keep an eye out and support his brother as best he can. The following morning, Kunan tells Mirika he's decided to enroll. She lights up, clearly happy that they'll get to spend more time together. Kunan admits he's a little nervous about being in a brand new place, so she tells him not to worry, she'll make sure he's taken care of. He thanks her, but can't help thinking that they might stir up some drama with her fanboys. When he brings it up, Mirika tries to brush it off like it's nothing, which makes Kunan suspicious. He asks if she's even popular at school, and she quickly sits up straighter, proudly saying that 5 guys have a crush on her. Kunan just sighs, realizing he'd better brace himself for dealing with some jealous punks. Afterward, Kunan slips into his uniform, getting ready for his first day at school. As he steps outside toward the carriage, Iko can't help but gush over how good he looks, and Kunan fires back with a smug joke about his irresistible charm before climbing into the carriage. But right before they set off, he casts a water-based spell to coat the wheels in a soft gel. After saying goodbye to his family, Kunan finally heads off toward the city. While they're on the road, Ixio notices how smoothly the carriage is gliding over the rough ground. Kunan explains that he created the spell to absorb all the bumps, pointing out that no one wants to deal with back pain just from a ride to school. Feeling proud of his handiwork, he wonders if becoming a magical technician might not be a bad career down the line. Ixio then checks in, asking if Kunan's nervous, but Kunan shakes his head, saying he's a lot stronger than he used to be. He thanks Ixio for all the support over the years and apologizes for being a burden when his condition was at its worst. He also tells his brother to let go of the guilt over that accident, saying it's in the past now. Ixio's caught off guard, but Konan stays firm and says that he's ready to keep moving forward, no matter how rough the road gets. Ixio smiles, seeing just how far his little brother has come from those darker days. But then Konan suddenly takes it up a notch, boldly claiming that he'll live longer than the whole world just so he can enjoy life to the fullest. Ixio blinks, wondering if this new attitude has Iko's fingerprints all over it. As they approach the school gates, Ixio is once again impressed when Konan accurately senses the people nearby. Eventually, they arrive at the school entrance, and Konan steps out of the carriage. Mirika hurries up to greet him, only for Konan to start gushing about how beautiful she looks. She chuckles and throws his teasing right back at him, leaving Ixio watching in stunned silence. When Mirika turns to guide him inside, Konan doesn't move right away. She looks back, a little puzzled, but Konan is focused, listening closely to the dozens of voices echoing inside the building, though the noise feels a bit overwhelming for once he feels like he's ready for it. After taking a deep breath, he extends his hand toward Mirika and cheekily asks her to escort him like a dainty maiden. She laughs and agrees, taking his hand with a smile. In a quieter corner of the academy, Kunan's newly assigned tutor Cast kept glancing at the door, wondering why her new student was running late. She knew Kunan was the son of a marquis, and that thought alone made her doubt if someone as green as her was even qualified to teach him. Before she could spiral further, a bunch of girls nearby started squealing over a gorgeous newcomer. She turned to see what the fuss was about, and her jaw nearly dropped as Kunan casually strolled past with his fiancée clinging to his arm. Snapping out of it, Cass rushed to catch up and introduced herself as his instructor. Kunan, without skipping a beat, greeted her in an overly feminine tone, saying he was just playing the part of a graceful lady. Cass stood there frozen, completely thrown off, until the bell rang and spared her the awkwardness. Mirika and Ixio gave a quick goodbye, leaving Kunan with Cass, who now realized she'd probably drawn the short straw with this oddball student. Not far away, a few students peered through a window, eyes fixed on Kunan. One of them muttered that Kunan bore the mark of a hero's scar, and that small comment was enough to tick off Prince Lyle. Noticing his mood shift, his flunkies immediately backtracked, smothering their earlier compliments with half-hearted jabs. The prince then spun around and ordered them to follow him, clearly irritated. Back with Cast, she prepped a private room for Kunan's advancement exam. She asked if he understood the basics, and he gave a quick nod. She then went on to explain that although students usually had long breaks between exams, Kunan would be allowed to take as early. Kunan looked puzzled, so she added that his father had pulled strings with the king to make it happen. Kunan casually mentioned that his father was actually pretty tight with the king. Still, he couldn't shake off the guilt that his dad had to use favoritism to pave his way. He turned to Cass and apologized for putting pressure on the school because of his status, but she just acted like she didn't hear it. But Kunan didn't stop. He started venting about the messed up politics in noble society. Trying to change the subject, Cass silently handed him the exam sheet. Kunan didn't even glance at it and just kept trashing his corrupt father until Cass finally snapped and begged him to leave her out of high society's messed up politics. Sometime later, Cass sits down alone with Kunan's exam papers. After all the ranting he'd done about aristocratic nonsense, she figured his answers would be an absolute mess. But the moment she starts reading, her eyes widen in disbelief because he didn't just do well, he aced the entire thing. Meanwhile, Kunan strolls over to the cafeteria to grab lunch with Mirika. But just as they arrive, Prince Lyle and his entourage block their path. Lyle calls out to his sister, and Mirika immediately starts fidgeting with her clothes, clearly nervous. Curious who's trying to stop her, Kunan steps forward and comes face to face with the prince. A few paces behind, Ixio approaches and freezes at the sight of a noble confronting his little brother. Lyle wastes no time and throws a jab at Kunan, mocking him for getting engaged to Mirika, despite his disability. Mirika's heart sinks, but she can't bring herself to defy her older brother. Kunan picks up on her silence and without a word decides Lyle needs to be taught a lesson. Before he can act though, Ixio steps in and tries to defuse the situation. But Lyle is already fired up and snaps at him to back off, so Ixio stands there, unsure of what to do. In the meantime, Kunan secretly casts a spell, drawing moisture from the air and nearby drinks, then sends it surging into Lyle's pants. Kunan then casually points at the growing wet patch and blurts out that the prince might want to check his trousers. The crowd around them goes dead silent before a ripple of gasps spreads through the room. Lyle panics and swears he didn't wet himself, but the damage is done, and with a red face, he storms off to clean up. Ixio, already suspicious, turns to Kunan and asks if that little trick was his doing. Kunan just shrugs and feigns innocence, pretending he's just as clueless as everyone else. With the drama behind them, the three of them finally sit down for lunch. While munching on his food, Kunan asks who that jerk was, and Mirika quietly tells him that Lyle is her older brother. Kunan feels bad for her, wondering why someone like that would treat his own sister so badly. He looks over at Ixio and thanks him for always being a good brother. Ixio forces a smile, but inside he's freaking out because Kunan just publicly humiliated a member of the royal family. Mirika tries to brush it off and tells him not to stress, but Ixio knows deep down that trouble's coming. And somewhere nearby, Lyle storms through the hallway, seething over what just happened. And while Kunan and his group were eating, the conversation quickly shifted to what happened earlier. Everyone's still puzzled over why Lyle confronted them so directly, not even bothering to hide how aggressively he was acting. Mirika chimes in first, guessing that Lyle's outburst was his way of trying to assert dominance over her. She reminds them that Lyle is the 6th prince, while she's only the 9th princess, meaning by default, she ranks beneath him in the royal line. But now that she's engaged to Kunan, things aren't that simple anymore. Kunan carries the legendary hero's scar and has already proven himself as a skilled sorcerer, so her position in the eyes of the nobility has shot up fast. And now that Kunan has officially stepped into high society, it's fair to say that both he and Mirika now outrank Lyle socially. Kunan scratches his head, admitting that all this royal hierarchy talk is way too confusing for him to wrap his head around. Mirika laughs and tells him that none of it really matters. What's important is that she's happy to be with him. That makes Kunan smile, and he says he's glad to hear it. Still, he suggests maybe he should go apologize to Lyle just to avoid unnecessary drama later. But the second he says it, both Mirika and Ixio jump in to shut him down, telling him absolutely not to even consider doing something that's stupid. Time flies by, and soon the day of Kunan's final exam rolls around. Before heading out, he fits in a quick training session with Jenny. During the practice, he summons a floating ball of water and then cleanly morphs it into a solid orb of ice shaped exactly like an apple. Jeannie raises her eyebrows, clearly impressed, and remarks on how much he's improved in such a short amount of time. That afternoon, Kunan arrives at the academy, mentally prepping himself for the final test. As he takes in the atmosphere, he can't help but feel a little fired up because this place really looks and feels like a proper school now. Professor Cass walks up to him and wishes him luck, though she adds with a grin that he probably won't even need it, considering how sharp his skills are now. Soon after, a group of students gathers and asks Mirika to introduce her fiancé. Taking the hint, Kunan politely steps forward and introduces himself as both Mirika's fiancé and Ixio's younger brother. With a warm smile and respectful tone, he greets the group, saying it's a pleasure to meet them. His words and manners leave a strong impression, and in no time, everyone around him starts to think Kunan might just be the definition of a true gentleman. Meanwhile, Lyle stands off to the side, gazing silently out the window, already plotting his next move. His scheming is cut short when a few students call out to him, telling him to hurry because the final exam's about to start. Lyle scoffs, replying with a smug tone that he'll show up whenever he damn well feels like it. The others, clearly nervous, remind him that the exam is being held all at once, so if he doesn't come now, he's out. He turns to look at their faces and immediately feels his temper spike. Just by the way they're looking at him, he knows they've been talking crap behind his back, too spineless to say it to his face. That realization only pisses him off more, but right before he can unleash anything, Kunan suddenly steps up with a bright smile, grabbing Lyle's hands like they're old friends. Beaming with energy, Kunan cheerfully introduces himself, saying they didn't really get the chance the other day. Caught completely off guard, Lyle yanks his hand back and snaps, asking who the hell gave Kunan permission to speak to him, let alone touch him. Kunan quickly apologizes, but instead of backing off, he just keeps complimenting Lyle with genuine admiration. One praise after another, and before Lyle even realizes it, his face starts turning red. He tries to hold his expression, but the redness gives him away. The other students can't help but crack up, completely shocked to see Lyle flustered like that, as it's a side of him no one expected to see. Moments later, everyone settles into their seats and the final exam begins. Time passes quickly, and when it's over, Professor Cass steps in front of the class to announce the results. Instead of writing names or numbers, she simply draws a flower on the board, her way of saying everyone passed. The classroom bursts into cheers as students congratulate each other, relieved and overjoyed to have cleared the exam. With everything wrapped up, Kunan hops into his carriage and waves goodbye, telling the others he hopes they'll meet again someday. As soon as he returns to the mansion, he jumps straight back into training with Jenny. She tells him to make a ball of water and split it into 10 equal parts. Kunan does it effortlessly and adds that he's been working on something new. With a grin, he transforms one of the water balls into a small bird, and it flaps its wings and takes off into the air. Jenny watches, stunned and speechless. A few seconds pass before she drops to her knees, realizing with a heavy sigh that there's barely anything left she could teach him. Not long after, the two sit down for a quiet tea break. That's when Jenny finally gathers the courage to be honest with him. She tells Kunan flat out that she truly has nothing left to teach him. According to her, he's already mastered every form of basic magic, and once he moves on to more advanced spells, he'll easily leave her in the dust. She confesses that it's been like this for a while now. She just kept throwing together odd little exercises, hoping to stay useful somehow. The moment she says that, Kunan bolts upright in protest. He tells her he's known for a while, but it was those very exercises, random or not, that helped him expand his magic. He insists that without them, he never would reach this level. Then he suddenly asks if she's trying to walk away because the pay isn't good enough, and says if that's the problem, he'll just tell his dad to give her a raise. But Jeannie shakes her head, her tone quiet but firm. She tells him it's the opposite. She can't keep accepting such a generous salary when she's no longer earning it. She doesn't want to be paid like a teacher when she doesn't feel like one anymore. She walks over to him and gently places both hands on his shoulders, locking eyes with him as she says she's reached her limit. She repeats it clearly. There's nothing more she can teach him, but Kunan refuses to hear it. He begs her to keep making those exercises, even if they're just smoke and mirrors meant to fool him into thinking he's learning. He says he doesn't care if they're fake. If it helps him grow, then it's more than enough. Still, Jenny doesn't flinch. She meets his eyes and tells him, plain and firm, that she just can't do it anymore. After saying that, she turns her back to him and walks away. As she makes her way home, she thinks about everything Kunan has accomplished, the talent, the drive, the things she never imagined a kid could pull off. Then something sparks inside her. A fire she thought had long gone out suddenly ignites again. If Kunan can aim to become the cerulean sorcerer, then so can she. There's no way she's letting herself get left behind by her own student. It's not too late, not for her. Back at the mansion, Iko informs Kunan that Flora has stepped down from her role as well, now that he's officially completed the Noble Children's curriculum and graduated. Her job, by all standards, is done. Kunan feels a little downhearted, realizing he never got the chance to properly say goodbye. But Iko explains that Flora didn't offer any farewells because she knew she wouldn't be able to hold back her tears. Hearing that, Kunan decides he'll write her a letter, something sincere to thank her for everything she did. That evening at dinner, Kunan brings up Genie's resignation to his father, Arsene Gurian. He explains how Genie felt unqualified to keep teaching him, believing that Kunan deserves someone far more gifted in magic to help him move forward. While they sit and think it over, Ixios suddenly recalls hearing about an elite royal sorcerer known as Zionli. The name instantly grabs Kunan's attention. Without hesitation, he says he wants Zionli to be his next teacher. But before the idea can even settle, Arsene cuts in and shuts it down immediately. He explains that requesting a royal sorcerer is next to impossible. Those mages operate directly under the crown and don't take private students. They're too important to leave the castle and almost never accept outside requests. But instead of backing down, Kunan starts cooking up a plan. He says he'll tag along during his father's next castle visit, pretend to get lost inside, and when one of the royal sorcerers shows up to help him, he'll somehow charm them into becoming his mentor. Arsene doesn't even let the idea breathe. He shuts it down on the spot, calling it reckless and flat-out dumb with a success rate that barely scraped 10%. He tells Kunan to forget it entirely, but before Kunan can argue back, his mother chimes in, flashing Arsene the classic puppy dog eyes. That's all it takes. Arsene folds instantly, groaning as he agrees to bring it up with the king and see what can be done. A few days later, a Grandmaster within the castle receives Kunan's formal request for royal tutelage. At first glance, the man barely gives it a second thought and is seconds away from tossing it aside. But the moment he notices the name Kunan Gurian, bearer of the hero's scar, he pauses, interest flickering in his eyes. A few days pass after that, and Kunan finally receives a summons from the royal palace to appear before the kingdom's royal sorcerer. He climbs into a carriage with his father, who looks genuinely pleased with how everything has played out. Kunan remarks that the bond between the king and his father must be incredibly strong if a request like this was accepted so quickly, but his father explains that the real reason for this meeting is that the court's head sorcerer took a serious interest in Kunan and his magic and personally wanted to see him. His father then asks what kind of spells Kunan can use at this stage, and Kunan immediately begins chanting before forming a small sphere of water, which soon transforms into a black cat that calmly settles on his lap. His father stares in disbelief, saying he never imagined magic could accomplish something like this, and reaches out to pet the tiny cat. He is shocked to find that it does not feel like magic or water at all, but exactly like any ordinary cat he might find wandering outside. Kunan explains that he only recently perfected its appearance, since before that he could only create animals that were completely transparent, though lately he has learned how to freely alter their color. His father happily plays with the cat for a while, prompting Kunan to ask if they should adopt a real one for their home. But like a typical father, he immediately shuts the idea down, insisting that cats would just make a mess around the house and that he would probably trip over one and injure himself. On top of that, he adds that Kunan's mother prefers dogs anyway, so the decision is not really up to him. Before long, they arrive at the capital and are welcomed by a silver-haired girl named Helga, the kingdom's second princess and Mirika's older sister. Kunan greets her cheerfully, saying he feels incredibly lucky to have someone as beautiful as her as his sister-in-law. His father briefly wonders if his son might be a bit too smooth for his own good, but decides to worry about that later. Helga smiles and says she has heard many stories about Kunan from her younger sister and would love to talk with him at length. She also notices the cat and asks if it needs any special food, but the moment Kunan's father sets it down on the ground, Kunan cancels the spell, and the cat melts back into nothing more than a small pool of water. Helga quickly realizes that Kunan is far more talented than she originally assumed. While his father looks genuinely disappointed about not getting the chance to name the cat, Helga offers to escort Kunan up to the Black Tower, as his father mentions that he plans to speak with the king for a bit before possibly heading home. Kunan tells him not to worry, saying that after visiting the Black Tower, he's thinking about meeting up with Mirika and maybe taking her out somewhere. His father tells him to enjoy himself and promises to have a carriage prepared whenever Kunan decides to return. Helga soon leads Kunan toward the Black Tower and casually asks whether he's fine walking on his own or if he needs any help. Kunan says he's completely fine, then immediately starts bombarding her with questions that leave her utterly confused, since every one of them is insanely complex when it comes to magic. She tells him that she can't possibly keep up with such a deep discussion while walking and instead asks if he knows how many children the current king has. Kunan admits he never really thought about it, so Helga explains that the king is an absolute powerhouse who has 7 princes and 10 princesses. She herself is the 2nd princess, while Mirika is the 9th. But what makes their kingdom especially unique is that the line of succession doesn't follow the usual rule where the eldest son automatically inherits the throne. Instead, they practice something known as a meritocracy, where every prince and princess is judged based on their abilities, talents, and dedication to their chosen path. Because of this system, even the youngest royal child has the same chance of claiming the throne as the oldest. Helga goes on to explain that she has already stepped away from her own claim by choosing the path of a mage, dedicating herself fully to refining her skills and becoming one of the country's greatest wizards. As they move through the corridors, Kunan suddenly feels an inexplicable pull toward a nearby window, where he stares absent-mindedly toward a dark tower in the distance, sensing countless different magical presences coming from it. Not long after, Helga shares something she considers extremely important, warning him that there is a real chance he could be dragged into the succession struggle for no good reason. She advises him not to align himself with any faction until he is absolutely certain of his stance, and cautions him to never say anything that could later be twisted and used against him to damage his reputation. In exchange for all that valuable advice, Kunan decides to return the favor by showing Helga a unique trick of his own. He freezes a thin film of water beneath his shoes, forming a slick layer of ice that lets him glide forward almost like he's skating. Helga instantly falls in love with the idea and excitedly tells him to try it on her too. Kunan quickly casts the spell again, and before long, the two of them are sliding through the corridors like a pair of reckless idiots, laughing as they go, while the guards scramble to chase them down since they can't risk Helga getting hurt. But sadly for the guards, Kunan and Helga are far faster than expected and manage to leave them behind. Their luck doesn't last long though, as a knight spots them and immediately gives pursuit. Kunan asks if they should stop, but Helga is having way too much fun and insists they can probably outrun him. That confidence turns out to be misplaced as the knight catches up to them and drags them outside into the garden, where they receive a proper scolding. Afterward, they are escorted toward the tower, where Kunan is finally introduced to Rondamund Actard, the kingdom's head sorcerer. Just standing before him makes Kunan feel small, and he realizes just how vast the world truly is. He had thought Helga's magic was impressive, but compared to Rondamund, it feels like she's on an entirely different scale altogether. Rondamund immediately asks if Kunan was born with a water crest, and Kunan confirms it, though he admits he doesn't really understand much about crests in general. Rondamund explains that there are 7 types of crests a mage can possess, each tied to a magical affinity such as fire, water, earth, wind, light, darkness, and foul. On top of that, each crest is ranked from 1 to 5 stars, making Kunan's 2-star crest a fairly common case. Helga adds that she herself is also a 2-star wind mage. Kunan quickly gets it, joking that he can feel the difference immediately, saying that he and Helga are like American processed cheese, while Rondamund is more like an artisanal wheel of aged Parmesan. Rondamund agrees that the comparison works well enough and then reveals that his own crest is actually 4-star. Right after that, he leads them down to the training grounds below and tells Kunan that he plans to test him a little to assess his magical ability. Kunan feels a bit nervous, wondering if passing this test might mean gaining a royal mage as a tutor, but he doesn't get much time to dwell on it, as Rondamund immediately calls over an older student who also serves as a royal mage and instructs him to display his water magic. The mage chants his spell, and in an instant countless droplets of water bloom into the air, forming an intricate, shimmering pattern. Rondamund turns to Kunan and calmly tells him to overpower the boy's magic with his own. Kunan immediately recalls what Genie once explained to him, that his talent isn't limited to creating water, but also extends to manipulating any water already present around him. Up until now, that has never been an issue, but he has never once tried to seize control of water created by another mage. He realizes that Rondamund has casually thrown him into a situation neither he nor Jenny ever considered, forcing him to adapt on the spot. With no time to hesitate, Kunan decides to try anyway and pushes his will toward the silver-haired mage's water. At first, it feels like it might work, but he quickly hits a wall as the droplets begin to resist, firmly held in place by the other mage's magic. Rondamund watches closely, clearly intrigued by what might happen next. Kunan refuses to give up, pouring all his strength and stamina into the attempt to force control. To everyone's shock, Kunan manages to tear 2 of the water spheres away from the seasoned mage before the spell is finally shut down. Kunan collapses to his knees, gasping for breath, while the silver-haired mage honestly admits that he never imagined a mere boy could wrest control of even 2 water spheres from him. He turns to Rondimond and declares that he would gladly take Kunan on as his student, only for the other mages to immediately speak up as well, all expressing their desire to have Kunan as their pupil. Rondimond shuts them down at once, saying he wants to see more of what Kunan can do and tells Kunan to create something of his own choosing. Kunan immediately shapes his water magic into a trampoline, and without hesitation, Rondimond jumps onto it, bouncing around like he's having the time of his life. The other mages quickly line up, eager to try it themselves, wanting to understand how it works and whether they could replicate it. Rondimond, however, tells Kunan that he wants him to stay the night at the castle so they can further explore the limits of his abilities. Kunan apologizes and explains that he already has plans since he has a date with Mirika and needs to take her out to dinner that evening. Right then, Helga asks if he can create any other animals with his magic, or even humans. Kunan answers that he can do both and immediately forms a human-shaped doll made of water magic, modeled after his maid. It isn't fully perfected yet, so the figure is still slightly translucent, and he hasn't fine-tuned the movements either, which makes it a bit awkward for now. The young mage then asks if the doll can actually do anything, and Kunan brings up the time he tried to make one fly, though it didn't go over well since the doll ended up looking pretty stupid while doing it. Rondimond instantly takes interest, leaving Kunan no choice but to demonstrate. He starts messing around with the doll, sending it flying back and forth through the air repeatedly, which ends up scaring half the people in the castle. This earns him yet another scolding, followed by a round of apologies from everyone involved. Before long, the sun begins to set, and Rondimond tells Kunan that he has officially passed the tests and that he will personally assign him a sorcerer to help refine his control over magic. Kunan is thrilled by the news and rushes to tell his father, who is far less pleased after hearing that his son has already caused trouble twice in just a few hours. He scolds Kunan for being reckless with his magic before storming off. Not long after, his father leaves to return to their mansion, leaving Kunan behind with Helga. She quickly realizes that Kunan needs to head to Mirika or he'll end up late for dinner. Helga suggests that they use magic to get there faster, otherwise they won't make it in time, so they decide to try a little experiment. Kunan creates a large bubble of water, and Helga uses her wind magic to push it forward, sending them soaring through the sky like they're riding a magic carpet, reaching the area near Mirika's chambers in no time at all. Unluckily, Helga forgets to slowly ease off her magic and cuts it completely, causing them to plummet straight down. They end up getting caught by the Knight Dario for the 3rd time that day, who is visibly fed up and delivers yet another long lecture, while Mirika waits nearby in her dress, still expecting her Prince Charming to arrive. This was the end of episode 4. Subscribe to not miss the next episode.